We are talking about modesty tonight. Kind of. You know, I tend to, much to Mr. Sam's chagrin, I tend to go rogue when I teach. But we're going to talk about this some, but we're going to kind of talk about it in a larger context tonight. But to get started, when I say the word modesty, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Clothes, yeah.
Clothes. All right, let's write that one down. Clothes, of course.
Skin.
Who said that?
Regular.
Exactly. You said, whoever said that. I'm glad someone said it, because let's face it, that's what we think of, right? Some skin. Are you showing some skin? So we're going to write some skin up here. Anything else?
Rules.
Rules. Rules.
Dress code.
Dress code. I like that. Dress code. Have those at school. Anything?
No one follows it.
No one follows it. It's sad. It's sad.
Style.
Huh?
Style.
Style? I like that. All of these are good, and they're exactly what we all kind of think of when we think about modesty, right? What you wearing? Are you showing too much? You know, all that kind of thing. And we're going to talk about that some. You know, I wanted to show y'all a few pictures here. That's kind of what we think of when we think of modesty, right? By the way, I think this is just a lovely dress this woman is wearing, but it goes all the way up.
That's what's okay.
Goes all the way down to, covers her arms, goes all the way down to the ground there. And ladies, who's ready for a fun-filled day at the beach?
Yes.
That's a Victorian era bathing suit.
That's a big too.
I think she looks lovely there, her little parasol. And I didn't want to forget the guys.
There's one.
The guys are ready for a fun-filled day at the beach too, right? Now, the funny thing about this, when we laugh at it because it's hysterical because of the stripes there, but that's kind of not that different from what guys wear to the beach now. I mean, they wear long shorts and a t-shirt. So the guys kind of haven't changed much. Now, they don't really carry the cane and the little hat to the beach anymore. But you know, for some reason, and I'll ask y'all and this too, I mean, when we think of modesty, you think of ladies first, right?
Right.
Yeah, because we're always the one who is told to.
Say again?
Because we're always the one
Whose fault it is.
yeah, it's our fault.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. We kind of think first, well, are the ladies
Yes.
dressed like they're supposed to, right? But you fellas, you know, y'all got a role to play here too. So you're not getting off the hook today, but you're right, and we shouldn't. We should be thinking of the guys and the gals. Because modesty is more than just kind of what we wear, and we're going to talk about that some as we go through this. Now, what I didn't want to do tonight is just kind of start through, this is what Mr. Sam said, just go through a list of rules. Do this, don't do this, wear this, don't wear this is good, this is bad. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me a good list of rules. If there's anyone in this world who loves a good list of rules, of do's and don'ts, it's me. I love that. But, she's doing party people. But anyway, but there's a reason for the way we as Christians act. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts and do this and don't do that. There's a reason why Christians behave in a certain way, conduct themselves in a certain way. I want to add something up here on modesty. Self-control. That's really kind of what this issue of modesty that we're going to talk about is really all about, is self-control. So I'm not going to really kind of go through this whole list of do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Some of your verses have some of that in it. But why is this issue of modesty important? The issue of modesty is just a small part of a much larger and much more exciting biblical concept. Yes?
Because our body
I can't hear you. Yeah,
Because our body's a temple.
because your body's a temple. I like that. But it's more than that, even. It's a much more exciting and just thrilling biblical concept. Modesty is one small part of this much larger issue that I think is exciting and that I think is very, very important to know. So our theme verse tonight is not one that any of you have. It's from 1 Peter, and I know some of you have 1 Peter, but it's a different verse. It's 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. All right, so this is in 1 Peter. The earthly author of this is Peter, right? So this is Peter writing this. And as a digression here, remember, the apostles were mostly fishermen. And when I read this verse, it is so beautiful. He uses a lot of Old Testament imagery in this verse. And I just think it's remarkable that these ordinary fishermen, God filled them with the Holy Spirit so much that he was able to write this verse inspired by God. So the first thing he says, but you. We got to figure out who you is. Who is you? I said, Peter was writing to this. He was writing during a time of great, great persecution of the church. Rome had burned. Nero blamed all the Christians for it. And Christians were under a lot of persecution. So who is you? Any guesses? Any ideas?
Anybody but you. That's what you is, right?
You are a chosen race. So who's he talking to when he says you?
Everyone.
Say it again?
Everyone.
It's not everyone.
Christians.
Christians, exactly. You are a chosen race. Christians. So before we can talk about why this issue of modesty is important, step one of this is making sure that you're in that you. Making sure that you're a Christian. Because if you're not a Christian, a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, if your heart is open and searching, you may get it a little bit. But when we talk about why we do the things that we do, it's because we are the Lord's. Because we are part of his kingdom and his family. And so, step one is Christian. You got to be a Christian. And if you are, then you're a chosen race. A chosen race. You were chosen by the Lord. You're a royal priesthood. You're royalty, by the way. A royal priesthood. A holy nation. And you belong to God. That's what God's own possession means. You belong to God. That's a pretty big deal.
Yes.
And if you do belong to God, do you think you need to act? Should that affect how you act?
Yes.
Yeah, it does affect how you act. The reason it needs to affect that, so you can proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into light. So you can tell other people about God, about Christ, and you can be an effective witness. Now, my Center Home girls aren't here tonight.
Yeah, they're at Outer Banks.
They're in the Outer Banks. But as well, some of you may know, they were baptized this past weekend. They made public professions of faith. They were baptized, part of God's kingdom now. Let's say Gracie. Gracie decided to go to school and wear a shirt with profanity plastered all across
She's
it.
done that before. She went.
Profanity plastered across it. First of all, it would not reflect well on Gracie. But more than that, who is it going to reflect on badly? Besides her parents.
God?
God. Christ. Because people will look at Gracie and say, "You just want to be a Christian? Wearing this? Acting like this? What's going on there?" Well, it must not be anything to this Christ stuff. She's acting like that. Tell Gracie we talked about her when you see her. But anyway, so we need to be able to tell people about Christ and be an effective witness. And be separate from the world. As Christians, we are to be set apart. We are to be in the world, but not of the world. And that's why I made this world up here. This is my world. We have a six-sided world, unfortunately, which is kind of weird. But I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. We live in this world, and we're going to live in this world until God calls us home again, or until he comes back again. And we live in it, but we're not of it when you're a Christian. Let me tell you something, kids. The world is not your friend. The world will tell you, do X, Y, and Z. This feels good. It looks good. Without caring about what the consequences to you are or anybody else. The world is not your friend. And remember that. Knowing that is a good first step. And so we have to live in this world, but we're not of the world. We're aliens. The Bible describes Christians as aliens in this world. Now we know that word from illegal aliens, people that are not from the country, not in the country where they're supposed to be. And that describes, the Bible uses that word to describe Christians on earth. We live here, but we're not from here. This is not our home. And so knowing that we're to be set apart from this world, even though we have to be in it, we have to be apart from it, that has to affect what we do every day, how we act. All right, let's look at a couple more verses. As Christians, 1, therefore if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. Once you come into Christ, that old person that you were is gone forever, which is good. Now, that doesn't mean that, poof, one day you're a totally different person. But it means you're starting on that track of thinking about everything. How does this reflect upon Christ? How will this affect my witness for Christ? How will this affect how people view the church? You start thinking about those things. Matthew 5, 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. I love this verse too, because none of you, except the 3 in the back, remember Ronald Reagan. He used to use this verse in a lot of his speeches, the imagery of it, and he did it in the context of the United States being light to the rest of the world. But he used this verse in a lot of his imagery and a lot of his speeches. So I remember this one fondly. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light, again being Christians, your light so shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So what's the purpose of the world seeing us act differently? What's the purpose of it? Read that verse. When we act differently, dress differently, talk differently than the rest of the world, what's the purpose of it? It tells you right there in that verse.
I'm blind. I can't read it.
Danielle can't see. Has to be someone who can see.
I'm blind too, I'm not kidding.
Oh, I don't believe it. You're young. You have good eyes. How about you, Ben? Austin, y'all see it up there? What's the purpose? It's the very last part of the verse.
Matthew.
That tells us what the verse is.
That's not even the last list of numbers, usually.
I'm farsighted, I cannot see.
Glorify God.
Thank you. The purpose of that is to glorify God in heaven. That's the purpose of it. To give glory to God. All right. How are Christians to live? This is from Galatians. Who had my Galatians verse? You did, Rachel? Okay, not yet. All right, so this, in a minute, you're going to read how the world lives. But now we're going to talk about how we as Christians are to live. We're to love one another. We're to be joyful. We're to be peaceful, patient, kind. Oh, I left the S off goodness. Good, faithful, gentle, self-controlled. The Bible tells us that when we become a Christian, these are the character traits that we should have. Goodness, faithfulness, kindness, love, patience, and self-control is really kind of what we're supposed to be focusing on tonight. That's where modesty comes in, when the self-control part of it comes in. Now, this is not how the world acts at all. Rachel is going to, in her good loud church voice, going to tell us how the world acts. So, go, Rachel.
Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God.
That's quite a list, isn't it? I mean, read just that list of words one more time. Don't read the whole verse.
sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies.
What do you? I spell it.
If I can find it.
Debauchery. Is it debauchery?
Orgies.
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 That's, yeah, just being sexually out of control.
What is strife? Jealousy.
Strife?
Yeah.
Strife is just, constantly at odds with people. Constantly fighting with people, and picking fights constantly. What was the other one you asked about? Strife and...
I think that was it. Yeah.
What came after strife?
Jealousy.
Jealousy. Jealousy. So what that paints is a picture of people constantly at odds, constantly fighting, constantly jealous, constantly picking on one another. It also portrays a world that's out of control. Sexual immorality, sensuality. That implies, being out of control sexually. Idolatry, worshiping false gods. Everything that is bad in the world and will lead you down a path from which it's very difficult to return outside of Christ. And so that's how the world lives, as opposed to Christians who live this way, which is a wonderful, peaceful, great way to live. And that's the difference between saved and unsaved, Christian and non-Christian. So this is how Christians are to live. Now, how are we to present ourselves to a lost and dying world? And this is when your verses come in, and we're going to talk a little bit more specifically. And it's not just, I know I don't remember who it was that said skin, but that's kind of what all we think of. Modesty and self-control is much more than that. It's about thinking every day, if I wear this, if I do this, if I hold myself out to be a Christian, how is this going to seem to the people around me? Are they going to think, wow, I want to know that Christ person, because I see something wonderful in Danielle. There must be something about Christ that I should check this out, as opposed to acting a different way, and they'll be like, no, I don't want anything to do with that, her or Christ or anything else. All right, so who has 1 Timothy 2:9-10? Read in your good loud church voice, Maddie, because I can't hear. Y'all know I can't hear from you.
Likewise also that women should
Adorn?
adorn themselves in respectable apparel
Clothing.
with modesty and self-control, not with
Braided?
hair and gold or pearls or costly
Costly
apparel,
garment.
but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works.
Very good. Thank you, Maddie. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about this, of course, we're talking to ladies here right now.
I was a little confused. Braided hair.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about that is what this verse is not. And it's not telling you ladies not to braid your hair. Okay, that's not what this, and again, I wish Gracie were here, because she always has these lovely two French braids in her hair, which are just beautiful, I think. It does not mean that Gracie can't braid her hair anymore, okay? We're going to talk about what this means a little bit. He says, I want women, and this is Paul that wrote this. He's writing to Timothy about a specific issue that had come up in the church. And he said, I want women to adorn, that means dress. I want them to dress themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly garments, but rather by means of good works, as is proper for women making a claim for godliness. So what had happened in this church is that the ladies, I guess they must have been kind of wealthy, but they had started getting into this competition with one another to see who could dress the flashiest and flaunt their wealth the most when they came to church on Sundays. So what they were doing is they were braiding their hair like with pearls in the braids to show off their pearls. And one would want to wear like 5 gold chains, and the other would want to wear 6 gold chains the next week. And it was all about how flashy we could be in the church. And it was causing problems. It was causing problems for the ladies because they were kind of like, as Rachel read in that verse, it was strife, it was jealousy. You know, they were fighting with each other, and that probably caused some, problems with their fellows too, because when 2 women are fighting, their guys are going to start fighting too. So it was causing all problems in the church. And so what Paul is saying here is, ladies, cut this out. Why do we come to church?
To learn.
Say it again?
Learn.
To learn. Excellent. Why else? Why else do we come to church?
To worship God.
Worship God, exactly. We come to learn about God, and we come to worship God. That's why you're here. And if you're here saying, woohoo, look at me! I've got pearls, I've got gold, look at me, I'm wearing a really revealing shirt. That's not why you're here. That's taking the focus away from God, away from Christ, and it's putting it on you. So what Paul is saying here is think very carefully, in this case, about what you wear and how you act in church. To be modest, so that the focus is not on me, but on Christ. Exercise self-control, be modest, be discreet. So that's what he's saying. Not don't braid your hair. Perfectly fine if anybody in here wants to put a nice braid in their hair. It's saying don't get into this, and that applies outside of our church walls. Because when a Christian steps outside of these walls, you're still an ambassador of Christ. And your focus should still be Christ. I want to point people to Christ. And again, and this applies to the fellas too, and it's not just revealing clothing. As I said, if you put profanity across your shirt, if you're wearing a shirt that has somebody giving someone else the middle finger, that is not going to glorify Christ at all. And so that's what we constantly need to think about. And I should have gone into more of this, as Rachel said, your body is a temple. This is a precious thing the Lord has given to you. Treat it as such. Treat it as a precious thing the Lord has given to you. All right, who has Mr. Peter? All right, good loud church voice.
Do not let your adorning be internal, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious.
Okay. So again, this is Peter writing now, and he's essentially saying the same thing that Paul is. This braiding of the hair with pearls must have been like a huge issue back in the first century, okay? They just couldn't get away from that. So what he's saying again is your adornment, your outward appearance, your clothing should actually be a reflection of what's inside of you. That, what we talked about earlier. There it is. The way you present your outward appearance should be a reflection of this joy, love, peace, self-control, kindness. Okay? When people see you, what should stand out is what's on the inside. This person shows goodness and faithfulness and kindness. That's what they should see more than anything else about what you're wearing and how you're acting and all of that. All right, and then our last one, Matthew 5:28 through 29, and this one does focus. Now, what we just read was talking about women, but as I said, that equally applies to the fellas. Okay, we don't think of guys as worrying about revealing clothes and stuff. Except no one wants to see your Speedo at the beach. Nobody. Okay, but the guys the same way. Think about what's on your shirts, what you're wearing, how you're presenting yourself. This one does focus a little more on the fellas. So we're going to see what that says. So Ben, your good loud church voice.
But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members and that your whole body be thrown into hell.
quite a verse, isn't it? When you think about that. First of all, it talks about how the fellows look at the ladies. Okay? And not to do it in a lustful, nasty way. Okay? Because as the Bible just tells us, that to the Lord is the same as acting on it. And the reason it's the same as acting on it is because that's what it leads to. Okay? The Bible tells us, you shall not commit adultery. We all know what adultery is. Well, adultery is actually breaking the marriage vows, but sex outside of marriage. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery in his heart. Again, none of y'all remember Jimmy Carter. You remember Jimmy Carter talking about this verse years ago? He talked about that too when he was president. But anyway, I digress again. Presidents used to be a lot more biblically focused, I think. But anyway, so that's talking about how men, you respect women. Respect women. Respect how you look at them. Respect how you treat them. Respect how you think about them. Because bad conduct starts right here. Starts right here. That's where it starts every single time. And so the Bible tells us, even thinking about it, fellas, is bad. And what does the Bible go on to tell us? If that's a problem for you, poke your eye out. Okay? If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it away. That's pretty serious. That's how serious the Bible takes how we are to act, how we are to present ourselves to the world. If your eyes are making you stumble, he said, pluck it out, because that would be better than leading you down the roads you're not supposed to go down. That's some pretty serious stuff. All right, do y'all have any questions? I feel like you should have some questions. Any comments? Sam, do you have any follow-up? I know he probably does. That's why I left some time for him.
Yeah, so very good lesson, first off. Secondly, to go along with that, notice that none of